The fluorescent lights in the surgical suite at Denver General Hospital cast a harsh white glow over Dr. Nathan Cross as he carefully sutured the final incision. His hands, steady despite 12 hours of continuous surgery, moved with the precision of a man who had performed this procedure hundreds of times. But this wasn't just another surgery. The patient on the table was Police Chief Sarah Mendez, rushed to the ER 2 hours ago after a multi-vehicle collision on I-25 had left her with internal bleeding and a ruptured spleen. Nathan had been finishing his shift, already changed into street clothes and heading for the door when the trauma alert had blared through the hospital. Level 1 trauma. Police officer. Critical condition. He'd dropped his bag, scrubbed back in, and taken command of the operating room without hesitation. That's what trauma surgeons did. They didn't watch the clock when lives were on the line. Now, at 9:47 p.m., the surgery was complete. Chief Mendez's vital signs were stable, her bleeding controlled, her prognosis good. Nathan stepped back from the table, peeling off his gloves as the surgical nurses began the cleanup process. "Nice work, Dr. Cross," said Dr. Emily Richardson, the anesthesiologist who had assisted. "That spleen was a mess." If she'd arrived 15 minutes later. Nathan nodded, too exhausted to elaborate on what they both knew. 15 minutes later, Chief Mendez would have bled out. As it was, she'd live to see her grandchildren, return to her job, and continue her 28-year career in law enforcement. "Make sure she's monitored closely in recovery," Nathan said, stripping off his surgical gown. "I want hourly updates on her pressure and hemoglobin levels. If there's any sign of continued bleeding, page me immediately." "You got it," Emily replied. Nathan walked out of the OR, his body heavy with fatigue. His scrubs were spattered with blood, his surgical cap askew, his face marked with the exhaustion that came from hours of intense focus. He made his way to the surgeon's lounge, where he'd left his belongings earlier. His phone showed 17 missed calls, most from his wife Jasmine, who was probably wondering why he wasn't home yet. He texted her quickly, "Emergency surgery. Chief of police. She's stable. Heading home now. Love you." Nathan changed out of his scrubs and back into his street clothes, a simple gray hoodie and jeans. He grabbed his medical bag, the one he always carried with emergency supplies, and headed for the parking garage. The hospital was quiet at this hour, the usual daytime chaos replaced by the soft beeps of monitors and the hushed conversations of night shift nurses. The parking garage was in the basement level, a dimly lit concrete maze that always felt vaguely unsettling at night. Nathan's BMW was parked in his designated spot, number 47, near the elevator. He walked toward it, keys in hand, his mind already on the drive home, the hot shower, and the bed waiting for him. But as he approached his car, he noticed headlights behind him. A vehicle was moving slowly through the garage, its engine rumbling in the enclosed space. Nathan didn't think much of it, probably another doctor finishing a late shift. Then the headlights brightened, and Nathan heard the chirp of a police siren. He turned to see a Denver PD patrol car pulling up behind him, its emergency lights flashing red and blue against the concrete walls. Nathan's stomach sank. He knew this feeling. He'd experienced it dozens of times throughout his life. The sudden appearance of police, the flashing lights, the unspoken accusation that he was somehow out of place, somehow suspicious, somehow a threat. He stopped walking and stood still, his hands visible, his posture non-threatening. The patrol car door opened and a white officer stepped out. He was in his late 30s with a military-style buzz cut and a face that carried the hardened expression of someone who saw threats everywhere. The officer's nameplate read, Coleman. "Evening," Officer Brad Coleman said, his hand resting casually on his belt near his weapon. "Can I ask what you're doing down here?" Nathan kept his voice calm. "I'm a doctor. I just finished a surgery. I'm heading to my car." Coleman's eyes scanned Nathan from head to toe, lingering on the gray hoodie, the jeans, the medical bag. "A doctor, huh? You got some ID to prove that." Nathan reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out his hospital ID badge. He held it up so Coleman could see it clearly. Dr. Nathan Cross, trauma surgeon. I work here. Coleman took a step closer, squinting at the badge. That could be fake. You got a driver's license? Nathan's jaw tightened, but he complied. He pulled out his wallet and handed over his driver's license. Coleman took it, examined it under his flashlight, then looked back at Nathan. This your car? Coleman asked, nodding toward the BMW. Yes. Registration and insurance. Nathan walked to his car, unlocked it, and retrieved the documents from the glove compartment. He handed them to Coleman, who studied them with exaggerated care. Nice car, Coleman said, his tone laced with skepticism. How's a guy like you afford a car like this? Nathan felt the familiar heat rising in his chest. I'm a trauma surgeon. I've been practicing for 15 years. Coleman handed the documents back, but he didn't step aside. You know, we've had reports of break-ins in this garage. Cars getting broken into, equipment stolen. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Nathan's hands clenched at his sides. I just told you, I'm a doctor. I work here. I've been in surgery for the past 12 hours. Coleman crossed his arms. That's a convenient story. But I've been a cop for 16 years, and I know when something doesn't add up. A guy in a hoodie wandering around a parking garage at night carrying a bag. That's suspicious. Nathan's voice remained steady, but there was an edge to it now. I'm not wandering. I'm going to my car. I showed you my ID, my license, my registration. What more do you want? Coleman's expression hardened. I want you to lose the attitude, for starters. You're acting pretty defensive for someone who's got nothing to hide. I'm not defensive. I'm tired. I just saved someone's life and I'd like to go home. Coleman stepped closer, invading Nathan's personal space. Saved someone's life? Who? Nathan hesitated. Patient confidentiality was a serious matter, but he also knew that withholding information could escalate the situation. A police officer. She was in a car accident. I performed emergency surgery on her. Coleman's eyes narrowed. Which officer? I can't disclose that without... Which officer? Coleman repeated, his voice rising. Nathan took a breath. Chief Mendez. For a moment, Coleman's expression flickered with something surprise, maybe doubt, but it was quickly replaced by suspicion. Chief Mendez is in surgery right now? She was. The surgery's over. She's in recovery. Coleman pulled out his radio. Dispatch, this is Coleman. Can you confirm the status of Chief Mendez? There was a crackle, then a voice. Chief Mendez is currently in recovery at Denver General. Surgery was successful. Coleman lowered the radio, but his suspicion didn't fade. So you were in the OR with her? I led the surgery. Coleman looked Nathan up and down again, clearly struggling to reconcile the image in front of him with the idea of a trauma surgeon. I don't know. Something still feels off. I think you need to come down to the station, answer a few more questions. Nathan's heart rate spiked. You can't be serious. Coleman reached for his handcuffs. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Nathan's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. He just saved the life of this man's boss, and now he was being arrested for the crime of existing while black in a parking garage. Officer, this is ridiculous. Call the hospital, talk to the surgical staff, they'll confirm everything I've told you. But Coleman wasn't listening. He grabbed Nathan's arm and spun him around, forcing his hands behind his back. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into Nathan's wrists. You're being detained for suspicious activity and failure to cooperate with a lawful investigation, Coleman said, his voice mechanical. Nathan's voice was steady, but there was fire beneath it. I cooperated with everything you asked. I showed you my ID, my license, my registration. You have no legal basis for this. Coleman ignored him, guiding Nathan toward the patrol car. You can explain all that at the station. As Nathan was pushed into the back of the patrol car, his medical bag tossed carelessly onto the seat next to him, he felt a familiar mixture of anger, humiliation, and helplessness. This wasn't the first time he'd been profiled. It wouldn't be the last. But knowing that didn't make it any easier. The patrol car pulled out of the garage, its lights still flashing. Nathan sat in the back, staring at the partition separating him from Coleman, his mind already working through what would happen next. Coleman had made a mistake, a big one, and by the time the truth came out, his career would be over. The booking process at the Denver PD 5th Precinct was humiliating. Nathan was fingerprinted, photographed, and placed in a holding cell with two other men, one drunk and belligerent, the other silent and defeated. He was allowed one phone call, and he used it to call Jasmine. "Nathan, where are you? I've been worried sick." Nathan kept his voice low. "I'm at the 5th Precinct. I've been arrested." There was a stunned silence. "Arrested? For what?" "Suspicious activity. I was profiled in the hospital parking garage after my shift. The officer didn't believe I was a doctor." Jasmine's voice turned sharp. "What officer?" "Coleman. Brad Coleman." "I'm calling our attorney. Don't say anything else. I'll be there as soon as I can." The call ended, and Nathan was led back to the holding cell. He sat on the hard bench, his head resting against the cold cinder block wall. Around him, the precinct buzzed with activity. Officers coming and going, suspects being processed, the machinery of law enforcement grinding on. But Nathan wasn't thinking about the indignity of his arrest. He was thinking about Chief Mendez, lying in a hospital bed, recovering from the surgery that had saved her life. He wondered if she knew what had happened to the man who had saved her. He wondered if she would care. An hour passed, then two. Nathan's exhaustion was overwhelming, but sleep was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Coleman's face, heard his accusatory tone, felt the bite of the handcuffs. Finally, a sergeant appeared at the cell door. He was an older man, in his 50s, with graying hair and a tired expression. "Dr. Cross?" the sergeant said. Nathan stood. "That's me." The sergeant unlocked the cell. "You're being released. Come with me." Nathan followed him out of the holding area and into a small office. Sitting at the desk was a woman in a suit, her expression serious. She stood when Nathan entered. "Dr. Cross, I'm Lieutenant Karen Hayes, Internal Affairs. I need to ask you a few questions about tonight's events." Nathan sat down, his guard up. "Am I still under arrest?" "No, the charges have been dropped, but we're conducting an investigation into Officer Coleman's actions, and your account is critical." Nathan recounted the entire incident, from the moment Coleman approached him in the parking garage to the moment he was placed in the patrol car. Hayes took notes, her expression growing darker with each detail. "And you told Officer Coleman you had just performed surgery on Chief Mendez?" Hayes asked. "Yes, he didn't believe me." Hayes set down her pen. "Dr. Cross, Chief Mendez woke up about an hour ago. One of the first things she asked was about the surgeon who saved her life. When we told her you'd been arrested, she was furious." Nathan felt a flicker of vindication, but it was tempered by exhaustion. "Is she all right?" "She's stable, and she wants to see you." Denver General Hospital was quiet when Nathan returned, escorted by Lieutenant Hayes. They took the elevator to the ICU, where Chief Mendez was being monitored. Hayes waited outside while Nathan entered the room. Chief Sarah Mendez was in her late 50s, with short gray hair and a face that bore the lines of a long career in law enforcement. She looked small in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors and IV lines, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "Dr. Cross," she said, her voice weak but clear. "Come in." Nathan approached the bed. "Chief Mendez, how are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," she said with a faint smile, which according to the nurses is pretty much what happened. She paused, her expression turning serious. "I heard what happened to you tonight. I heard what Coleman did." Nathan didn't know what to say. He settled for, "I'm just glad you're okay." Mendez's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm not okay with what happened to you. You saved my life, and one of my officers arrested you for it. That's unacceptable." "Chief, I appreciate that, but—" "No buts," Mendez interrupted. I've been in law enforcement for 28 years. I've seen good cops and bad cops. Coleman is the latter, and I'm going to make sure he faces consequences." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Chief, this isn't the first time something like this has happened to me. It won't be the last. I've learned to live with it." Mendez's expression softened. "You shouldn't have to." "No one should." She reached for a button on the side of her bed and pressed it. A moment later, Hayes entered the room. "Lieutenant," Mendez said, her voice stronger now, "I want a full investigation into Coleman. I want to know if there are other incidents like this in his record, and I want it done by the end of the week." Hayes nodded. "Already underway, Chief." Mendez turned back to Nathan. "Dr. Cross, I can't undo what happened tonight, but I can promise you that it will mean something. Coleman will be held accountable, and we'll use this as an opportunity to do better." Nathan nodded, feeling the weight of the night begin to lift, if only slightly. The investigation into Officer Brad Coleman took less than a week. What it uncovered was damning. Over his 16-year career, Coleman had been the subject of 12 complaints, all from people of color, alleging racial profiling, excessive force, and discriminatory behavior. None of those complaints had resulted in significant disciplinary action. They'd been filed away, dismissed as misunderstandings or exaggerations. But now, with Chief Mendez's full support and the media spotlight on the case, those complaints were being taken seriously. Coleman was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. The Denver Police Department issued a public statement acknowledging that Nathan had been wrongfully detained and apologizing for the incident. The local news picked up the story, and it quickly went national. "Trauma surgeon arrested after saving police chief's life" became a headline that sparked outrage and calls for reform. Nathan didn't seek the attention, but he understood its importance. His story was a stark reminder of the biases that persisted even in 2024, even in progressive cities like Denver. 2 weeks after the incident, Nathan was invited to a press conference at Denver PD headquarters. Chief Mendez, now recovering at home, appeared via video link. She spoke directly to the cameras. What happened to Dr. Nathan Cross was wrong. It was a failure of judgment, a failure of training, and a failure of leadership. As chief of police, I take responsibility for that failure. But responsibility means more than words. It means action. She outlined a series of reforms: mandatory bias training for all officers, an independent review board for complaints, body cameras for all patrol officers, and a zero-tolerance policy for racial profiling. "Dr. Cross saved my life," Mendez continued, her voice steady, "and in return, one of my officers treated him like a criminal. That ends now. We will do better. We must do better." Nathan watched the press conference from home, sitting on the couch with Jasmine. When it ended, she turned to him. "How do you feel?" she asked. Nathan thought about it. Tired, angry, but also hopeful. Maybe this time, something will actually change. Jasmine squeezed his hand. "You made them listen. That's not nothing." 6 months later, Officer Brad Coleman was officially terminated from the Denver Police Department. The investigation had found a pattern of discriminatory behavior that violated department policy and Colorado state law. He appealed the decision, but the appeal was denied. Coleman disappeared from public view after that. Some said he moved out of state. Others heard he was working private security in a small town somewhere. Nathan didn't keep track. Coleman's fate wasn't his concern. What mattered was the change that followed. The reforms Chief Mendez had promised were implemented. Bias training became mandatory. The independent review board began holding officers accountable. And slowly, the culture within the Denver PD began to shift. Nathan returned to his work at Denver General, saving lives, teaching residents, and pushing the boundaries of trauma medicine. But he also became an advocate, speaking at community events, meeting with lawmakers, and sharing his story to highlight the need for systemic change. One evening, nearly a year after the incident, Nathan was finishing his shift when he received a page. "Dr. Cross, you have a visitor in the lobby." Curious, Nathan made his way downstairs. Standing near the entrance was Chief Sarah Mendez, looking healthier than she had in months. She smiled when she saw him. "Chief," Nathan said, surprised, "what brings you here?" Mendez held up a folder. "I wanted to give you this personally." Nathan took the folder and opened it. Inside was a commendation from the Denver Police Department, recognizing his service in saving Chief Mendez's life and his contributions to police reform. "You didn't have to do this," Nathan said. "Yes, I did," Mendez replied. "You saved my life, and you helped save this department. That deserves recognition." Nathan looked at the commendation, then back at Mendez. "Thank you. But I didn't do this for recognition. I did it because it was right." Mendez nodded. "I know, and that's exactly why you deserve it." As she turned to leave, she paused. "Dr. Cross, I hope you know that what you went through, it mattered. It sparked a conversation this city needed to have, and it reminded all of us, especially those of us in law enforcement, that we serve everyone, not just the people who look like us or think like us. Everyone." Nathan watched her walk away, the commendation still in his hands. He thought about that night in the parking garage, the fear, the humiliation, the anger. But he also thought about what had come after, the reforms, the accountability, the hope. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was progress. And progress, however slow, was worth fighting for. 3 years later, Nathan Cross was named Chief of Trauma Surgery at Denver General Hospital. It was the culmination of decades of hard work, dedication, and a commitment to excellence that had never wavered, even in the face of injustice. At his installation ceremony, surrounded by colleagues, friends, and family, Nathan gave a speech. He spoke about the importance of medicine, the privilege of saving lives, and the responsibility that came with that privilege. But he also spoke about that night in the parking garage. 3 years ago, I was arrested for the crime of being black in a place someone decided I didn't belong. It was humiliating, it was unjust, but it also became a catalyst for change, not just in the Denver Police Department, but in my own life. It reminded me that my work doesn't end when I leave the operating room. It extends into the community, into the systems that shape our society, into the fight for a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. He paused, looking out at the audience. "I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because it's not unique. Millions of people face bias, discrimination, and injustice every day. Some have the platform to fight back, others don't. My responsibility, our responsibility, is to use whatever platform we have to amplify those voices, to demand accountability, and to build a world where stories like mine become relics of the past." The applause was thunderous. As Nathan stepped down from the podium, he saw Chief Mendez in the audience, clapping along with everyone else. They exchanged a nod, an unspoken acknowledgement of the journey they'd been on together. That night, as Nathan drove home, he passed the parking garage where it had all begun. He slowed down, looking at the entrance, remembering that night. The fear, the anger, the injustice, but also the resilience, the fight, the change. He kept driving, the city lights of Denver glowing in his rearview mirror. Ahead of him was home, family, and a future shaped by the belief that even in the darkest moments, hope could survive. And sometimes, that hope could change everything. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.